Hello everyone, welcome to another episode of our Beyond Stigma series focusing on Middle Eastern and North African representation in the media, where we delve into discussions surrounding different identities and experiences of those who have worked in the media and the arts and entertainment industries. Today we are joined by a very special guest, Atilla Akinci. Atilla was born in Germany to Turkish parents. In 2009, at the age of 21, he moved to Turkey, and in Istanbul he trained at the Mujdat Gezen Conservatoire for 2 years. After moving to the UK in 2013, he trained on a postgraduate course at Oxford School of Drama from 2014 to 2015. Atilla works in theatre, film, TV, and voiceover, and TV credits include Killing Eve and an upcoming Netflix show. Films include Kismet, Phea and Room 7, which he is currently filming, and radio includes Journey into Fear and Homefront for BBC Radio 4. Atilla, thank you so much for being here today.
Thank you for having me. It's a pleasure.
Thank you very much. So the first question we've been asking all our guests is a very general one, but what made you want to pursue a career in this industry?
For me, it was actually a teacher who pointed me in that direction. That happened when I was still at high school back in Germany. It was towards the end of it. I think I was 18, and we performed a scene of Antigone. It was, as a sort of homework, tiny scene. And she pulled me aside after class and said, you might, why wouldn't you consider maybe a career in acting? Just have a look at it. And that kind of got things rolling for me. And I was a very confused late teen at that time. I really didn't know what to do myself, and I found it very hard to make a decision as to what to study, and everyone else around me seemed to have a lot of certainty, and I really suffered from not knowing what I wanted to do with my life. And so I spent a couple of years doing internships and working in different places to kind of get to know myself in a workplace as well, and didn't rush the process of making a decision. And in that time period, I listened to her, and I watched a lot of films. It was a kind of, now it seems quite old school, but it was a video rental service where, I would go there in the middle of the night and sort of rent 3 DVDs and take them back home and watch them back to back throughout the night and take them back. So I had a couple of years where I watched a lot of films. And I loved being on my own, just watching these stories, and they made me feel less alone. And I loved the sharing of feelings and stories, and I thought, you know what, that is actually something that I would like to do. I felt like I wanted to be where those actors were on screen doing that exact same thing, and I think that got things rolling.
It's so interesting to hear, because I've also spoke to a few other people who have mentioned that their teachers really like inspired them to go off into this career, and it's just crazy to think how inspirational teachers can be.
Teachers are important.
Yeah,
and I think teachers deserve more respect. That's been quite interesting for me. I've had, sort of because of my background, I've had access to obviously Turkey culturally and Germany and here, and I end up comparing a lot, and I think that's just natural because a different way of life.
Mm-hmm.
And from experience, I can say that teachers in each of these 3 countries, they have a different status socially. Teachers are really highly respected in Turkey, for instance. If you meet a teacher, if you meet a teacher socially, they're just given a lot of respect, and it's a very honorable profession to have, although it's not well paid, unfortunately, which is a problem. But I think, teachers deserve a lot of respect, and they have a lot of responsibility, because I think I might not be an actor today if she hadn't pulled me aside and cared enough to tell me, to tell me when she saw some kind of light, and I'm very grateful. So
another question I have for you is, who are your biggest role models in this industry?
I'm not sure if I'm the kind of person who has, because I don't have this vivid kind of image of the person that I think of over the course of years. But of course, there are people whose work I admire. I actually watched Nomadland last night. You know, I'm inspired by the Oscars, so I watched Sound of Metal. Riz Ahmed was amazing
wow.
in that film. He was great, and Frances McDormand, in Nomadland was incredible as well. Um, really loved her physicality and really spontaneous and open in her work. But I think if there's somebody who I've looked up to, you know, over the course of years, who I remember and go back to, I would say Daniel Day-Lewis. I think I like extremes in general in life. I think I'm curious what taking something to an extreme, what kind of the fruit that bears, you know, what can you get out of something when you have absolute dedication? And to me, that's what he, you know, has always done with his parts, is this complete transformation, utter focus, and that I adore. You know, that is something that I want to aspire to. But to me, that is something that I like to keep. You know, I believe in change and perpetual change, and that is something that changes with me all the time. The people that I look up to and who gives me inspiration.
It's so true, especially in this industry. I feel like there's always so many new actors that come along and they're so great, and suddenly you find yourself looking up to this new person that you might not necessarily have thought of before.
And lots of young people, you know, that come up as well that you maybe see for the first time, and that, you know, yeah.
What do you think about the current representation of MENA individuals in the media?
It's a big question. You know, I think that the MENA representation in the media has improved. I think it used to be bad compared to what it is today. You know, remember the times where, and I'm sure there are still places in the world where that happens, where unfortunately the Middle East is perceived in a mostly political way, and you know, and in the past unfortunately had the image of terrorism, and we knew that, you know, when those events happened, that unfortunately that was for a lot of Middle Eastern actors, the part of playing the terrorist was something that they came across in an audition, you know, and something they had to think about and see how that felt to do that. And I think, but that was unfortunately a very stereotypical and frequent occurrence. And I think that actually happened before I even came here and graduated in Oxford. Yeah, but I think that things are changing for the better, not just for the MENA community, but also for all minorities. I think that the conversations are going in the right direction. And Riz Ahmed, for instance, Sound of Metal is a great example, because it didn't matter that he's MENA, you know, and I think that is a point that we want to reach, and hopefully will reach, where we don't feel the need to explain a character's background anymore, and we can just put them on screen or on stage, and they can just exist as a human being with all the other human beings around them. You know, and I think we're still headed in the right direction, but I think there's still a long way to go. I think we're not where we need to be. There's a lot of work to be done, and a lot of broadening of horizons to be done, and a lot to be learned.
Yeah, I mean, it sounds really great that you're saying it has improved and you can see a bit of change. And I think what you're saying about Riz Ahmed, especially in Sound of Metal, just playing a normal character where they don't have to talk to you and have this whole narrative of him being from the Middle East or North Africa, and making that his whole personality and his whole storyline. I think that's really important, like you say, because while it's great to have MENA stories out there as well, sometimes, you know, actors don't always, they want to just play a role that they like, you know, it's a role that they like the sound of, and it doesn't always necessarily have to be that character being MENA, the story being about being MENA, and all this kind of stuff. So I think, you've done so much work.
I try to be busy.
Yeah, well, it's good.
Yeah.
And what have your experiences been like as a MENA individual working in these different parts of the industry?
I mean, you know, I think initially I graduated in 2015, and I think initially I felt a lot of confusion as to what I was in this industry and in this society as a result of it as well. You know, I felt sort of because of my mixed background as well, that I was born Turkish, but in Germany, I think that it helped me get an agent, for instance, in Showcase. And I think, you know, I think that it was probably a mix of the quality of my performance that I showed, but I think it probably helped that they saw a Mena background in me that they felt they could maybe utilize for castings. However, what was rather frustrating after that was the lack of knowledge in regards to the geographical area. Because my agents at the time, and this was, I'm not going to name them, but it was a bigger and more well-known agency at the time. They didn't know whether, and one might not know this, but that Turkish doesn't equal Arabic, for instance. And I always say, you know, sometimes it's not, you know, the problem is not to know. I think one can be blamed for not wanting to learn. I think that's where it becomes active.
Right. Yeah.
And after 6 months of being signed with them and mentioning several times that I don't actually speak Arabic, they would still call me up and ask me which accent of Arabic it was that I would speak.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, and that would feel really frustrating, because on the one hand, it shows a lot of disinterest, but also a lack of respect towards my background. Like,
100%.
You know, I've told you several times, why can't you remember that that isn't actually the language I speak? And what then also happened was, you know, you're sort of there are these drawers that you know, used to be a lot firmer, I think, in the casting industry, that based on your look or based on your background, you would go up for certain parts.
Yeah.
And obviously they did try to get me into this Mena, or at the time, you know, it was a Middle Eastern, the term Mena wasn't there, so it was a Middle Eastern casting bracket.
Right.
However, the problem is that actually by stereotypical standards, I might not be the best pick for a Mena character, because they might be looking for a darker skin tone, you know, and this is where we really get into stereotypes, you know, Western stereotypes, but also how stereotypes play into the casting process. And I think when they realized that I don't serve it as well as they hoped for, it was a very quick goodbye after that. And then, you know, following on from that, it was just a lot of confusion, because I didn't know for a long time when the term BAME was around. I didn't really know, I didn't know whether I was BAME. I asked myself the question of, am I white a lot? You know, because all of these, for me, coming from Germany, and also, I mean, I think those terms started popping up more and more, and people learn about them and they define them in a more detailed sort of way. And I, you know, I would look at my skin, I would go, well, am I white?
Yeah.
So, but can I go up for white British roles? I can't do that either. I'm sort of a third culture kid, I think, which is also a term that I've only learned recently, actually. But I felt very confused for a long time, and now with the emergence of the term Mena, actually, it's the first time that I feel, wow, okay, I can, maybe this is it. Maybe this is the community that I belong to, that sort of describes, you know, although that is also, you know, it does and it doesn't, because sort of the German influence and plays a big role, and yeah, but generally I would say that it's caused a lot of confusion as to where I belong in this industry.
Yeah, and that's something that I've found a lot with a lot of the guests we've had on this show have all kind of said the same thing as you. It's not only the confusion of a lot of them obviously being from a MENA background but living in the UK or other countries in the West and not knowing exactly, are they British, are they Turkish, are they Iranian? just that whole confusion of who am I, but also this whole trouble with the term BAME and am I white? Because like you said, you're not going to get cast for a white role, but you're physically white. So it's just, do you know, like, so where do you belong? And I feel like said there's the term Mena, but because you're from Germany and you grew up in Turkey, like, you know, do I actually belong to any of this? I can see that kind of frustration that you might have.
Yeah, definitely, yeah. And you know, it's still being redefined. I think, you know, this is all really all the conversations around this, and I think it's all in flux still at the moment. It's all in movement, and because sometimes then, you know, then this community was there, and I thought, wow, great, okay, this is a step in the right direction. But then I go, okay, now, well, can I go up for Arabic parts? How right would that be? Or I see a lot of castings for Arabic parts, and Arabic, obviously, you know, that's more than one country, so that's a number of countries that would be considered for that. But because I don't speak Arabic, I I feel outside of those boundaries as well. But I mean, you know, how often does it happen that somebody's actually looking for a Turkish role? Well, not very often, unfortunately. It's very specific. And so I'm trying to figure out, you know, what is okay to do, what isn't okay to do, you know. Also talking, I have a lot of friends, obviously, as part of that community, and people that I meet every now and again on jobs, and you know, I want to hear their opinions as well. You know, how would you feel if I played an Arabic role, put on a Middle Eastern accent, which I can do in English? Would you feel comfortable or not? You know. So yeah, it's complicated, but at least there's movement.
Yeah, I can see the frustration there as well, because, for example, if there was a story coming out about Turkish person, and then they cast an English person to play it, obviously, like, the Turkish community and even the MENA community won't be very happy with that. So, and then when you dig it deeper and take it into the MENA community and say, okay, but can an Arabic person play the Turkish person? Is that acceptable? Because we're in the same region, or is it still not? And it's such, you know, I think that's so important, and it's very important to talk about it, because you don't want to obviously offend people either, and you want to, you know, but like you said, it's so hard to come across the roles that are specifically for someone Turkish as well. And I think it goes back to show as well that maybe, I don't know, correct me if I'm wrong, but when casting agents are looking for someone MENA, they automatically think Arabic. And I think that's kind of what happened in your case when you said, with the agency that you were in, they kept asking you, can you speak Arabic? Can you, like, put on an
because
Arabic
they wanted me to, they really wanted me to speak Arabic, but unfortunately that wasn't one of my skills. So
and it kind of just shows the stereotypes as well, that everyone in the MENA region speaks Arabic. But it's just like, it's such a diverse region, and there's so many languages, so many religions.
There's a lack of knowledge about the region in general, and its detailed geography and culture, right? Which is also where stereotypes stem from. I think the stereotypes are really, that's what we're wrestling with at the moment, not just as an industry, but, you know, as a country, because, you know, stereotypes, you know, the world used to be more separated than it is today. And I think that actually people, you know, in general, just had a very narrow, limited knowledge about people from other places. And those stereotypes that then were formed were used in films, in casting, and they were important. To me, you know, it sometimes felt like, especially the smaller roles, because you see when an actor is more well known and more promising financially, there can be more leeway in terms of, I think that kind of opens up and makes people go, oh, but what could they play? Because, you know, but I think if we're talking about the smaller parts, I think what you're doing is you're painting the scenery of the geography where your project is set in, you know. And I think part of that visual scenery that you're painting are the actors that you're casting. And to me, it felt like, I might be wrong, but to me, it felt like casting directors or productions, because it's not just casting directors, but productions try to paint the image according to the stereotypes so people could relate. You know, I've seen a lot of casting calls where they would look for a German actor and they would say at least 6 foot tall, strong chin, blonde hair, blue eyes.
Wow.
It's so limited. But that is the stereotypical image that people had in their minds. And so, unfortunately, that's what they were looking for, to create a believable world, you know. But all that is changing now.
And you've done different roles. Have you played roles that have been Mena, like Mena characters at all? Or have you auditioned for like roles that are Mena based?
Not obviously. I mean, yes, occasionally it does happen.
Yeah.
Weirdly enough, I find myself auditioning more for German parts at the moment.
Right. Okay.
Yeah, not so much for Mena anymore. You know, I think that it changes from all sides. I think that there are lots of castings that are meant for Mena characters that I probably won't be called in anymore. For instance, you know, I've been told many a time that I could be Jewish.
Right. Okay.
And you know, and again, that is another stereotype that people adhere to there when they say that. But and in the past, it did happen occasionally that I would audition for a Jewish part, and that does not happen anymore at all. Not at all. And I think that is due to the fact that, you know, if they have Jewish roles, they are trying to cast Jewish actors for those parts.
Okay.
And I think a similar thing happens with Arabic characters now as well. Especially if they need the language, then I wouldn't be the right pick for it anyway, because I don't speak the language, and I wouldn't want to sort of learn the lines and deliver a poor imitation of, which is also, you know, could happen in the past, that you would, if you have 3 or 4 lines, that you would just learn how to say them, and Arabic people would hear that it's not that you're not actually speaking the language. But everyone else would believe it, so, you know.
Right.
Yeah, it's not that clear. I'm not being put into a Mena box at the moment. That is not happening.
Okay.
Yeah.
Right. And do you think one of the reasons for that is because you look more Western, like stereotypically Western?
I think so. I think, you know, I've thought about this a lot, and I think that it's both an advantage and a disadvantage.
Right.
As in, I think that if you have a look that matches the stereotype of your ability and background. So say you speak a language, you know, I don't know, let it be Norwegian, and your look matches the stereotype of what a Scandinavian person looks like, you're a very obvious pick for a casting director to be seen for a part.
Right.
You know, or that's at least how it used to be from my perspective. That's how I explained it to myself. But I think that my background just causes a lot of confusion, you know.
Right.
So I think that especially at the beginning of a career, it can be really helpful if there's a coherent structure to your background and the language and the look, right?
Yeah.
And that can mean that you start working very quickly. But then we also know that those people often then struggle later on in their career to get rid of that. Because now, you know, they slip into that drawer, and then people see, oh, that's what they do, that's what they're known for, and they keep giving them the same thing. Whereas for me, I think that my look, if we're talking again about German and Turkish stereotypes, or the look, the stereotypical look, I don't fit either of those. I think that's what I felt, is that there just seems to be a more sort of hard to define look about me, where they can't actually place me easily geographically, and my accent is quite nondescript as well. So it's just, I think, more vague. And, you know, I was even advised, again, this was a one-to-one that I had with a casting director, like an advice session for 15 minutes. And, you know, when I had my CV out and it would say German and Turkish on there, first of all, she was surprised about how well I spoke English when I walked into the room. which is odd.
Right.
And then following on from that, and she meant well, but her advice was maybe you should remove one of your languages from your CV.
Oh, wow.
Because it could be confusing. And I just said, you know, I've worked so hard, you know, on my English pronunciation, on the language, and I just thought that I'm adding strings to my bow.
Right.
But you're telling me that it might be a disadvantage. Why? Because people can't comprehend how I can be one person speaking more than one language fluently, natively,
Yeah.
you know, and that hurts.
Of course.
You don't know what to do with that kind of information, you know, where you're being told to be less than you are because it might be helpful professionally. But it's not I who have to change. I understand that now. It's that others have to learn.
Of course.
Yeah.
That's so sad. I mean, you know, to know all these languages is an amazing thing to know. You know, learning languages isn't easy, and I feel like maybe I'm wrong again, but I feel like if an English person, you know, English actor was to say, I know this language, this language, this language, I don't think the casting agent would ever tell them to remove it off their CV. You know, because it's beneficial having all those languages because it means you can play more roles.
No, absolutely. Yeah.
And, you know, what you were saying earlier about not fitting into one box and being German, Turkish, and British. I mean, it's a shame because it just proves how versatile not only you, but other MENA actors are, because a lot of MENA actors know other languages as well because of their, you know, mother's native language or being mixed race. And it's just like, why do you have to fit into a box? Why can't isn't it better to know German, know Turkish, know English, and be able to and look, you know? But I mean, to me, as someone who has a lot of Turkish friends who watches Turkish shows, if I saw you, I would probably realize that you're Turkish, you know? And just because other people don't think you stereotypically Turkish, that's not really right, because it means they're taking that away from you and stopping you from playing Turkish roles, for example, because you don't look stereotypically Turkish to them.
Yeah.
But like you said, it's their job to learn, not you to change yourself. Because if anything, it's great to look more than one, stereotypically one.
I think so.
From one place, and know all these languages, because you can play so many different roles.
Yeah, and that's sort of my hope that, you know, in the long run, that once I actually get my foot in the industry, because that's taken a while, I think that confusion on the casting side and also in myself, and, you know, me not knowing where do I belong, what can I play, who can I be in all this, just meant that it's taken a few years, and you know, it's slow but steady, and I'm going in a good direction, and I'm hoping that it will turn into an advantage for me one day, that I'm actually being offered roles from a lot of varied backgrounds, hopefully, that I could play, you know, or that the background simply or no background. I think that in the casting process, the question that should be asked should be, do we need to cast this role white British? Like, do we have to? Because I think there are lots of parts that are cast as white British that don't have to be. They could be opened up to anyone and everyone. And I think the question shouldn't be anymore, oh, can we have a MENA actor for this? Can we have a black actor for this? Can we have an Asian actor for this? No. I think the question should be, do we really have to cast this part white British? And if the answer is no, if there aren't good enough reasons for it, open it up to everyone. Is at least what I would like to see. I think that's what's needed, really.
Yeah, I think that's a really, really good point. But I feel like also casting directors, they might get a bit worried, because I feel like in situations where they've gone against the norm and cast a main character that's just non-white English, non-white British, they've got a lot of criticism, right?
From the white population, or?
Yeah, from just like society, right? A lot of people might just like saying like, why did you cast this person for this role?
That's true. You're right.
And I feel like, I might be wrong, but I feel like that fear stops them from doing that.
Yeah.
Or they may feel as if, you know, casting the main character non-white means that less people are going to watch it. You know, less money for them in the long run. I don't know, I might be wrong, but that's what
you are right. I think that is especially the case. I think it happened with Harry Potter in the West End as well. I think that happens a lot with stories that maybe existed as books or already were filmed, and they're like sort of a series of films that people relate to, and I think what it was is that they often don't like when that particular character that they have known for so long in that particular way now doesn't look that way anymore.
Changed, yeah. Right, yeah.
You know, I think that is happening. Yeah. And that probably depends on, I mean, each production and casting director individually, what they decide to do with it. Yeah, but I you know, I'm optimistic. I think that we're heading in a good direction. You know, at least, yeah, at least from what I see in the UK. And it's very interesting for me to sort of look over to Germany and see, oh, how are they doing? You know, because Turkish actors, I never really worked in Germany, but I know that Turkish actors had a really hard time over there professionally, you know, because, you know, they got to play the cleaner or the cab driver or the vegetable vendor, or, you know, really, really certain roles, and that lasted for a very long time, which is a real shame if you think about, you know, Turkish people went to Germany in the 60s. And then you have, you know, it's the biggest foreign population, and, you know, I mean, clearly there are Turkish people in many, many other professions than those and standings in life. Yet they perpetuated that for a very long time. So part of me was glad that I actually came to the UK, because I felt that the UK was more forward thinking in that respect than Germany was, and still is. Still is.
Wow. I was actually going to ask you about that, just to see like what kind of main differences you've seen between the UK, Germany, and maybe even Turkey from living there. And you know,
you do mean in respect to casting, especially?
Yes, yeah, acting, casting. I know you said you didn't really work while you were in Germany, but you know what you just pointed out about Turkish actors is really interesting.
Yeah, I'm trying to start working over there now. I mean, fortunately, I can see now those conversations are beginning to happen. But, you know, I still remember, I think it was 3 years ago, I went back to my hometown and went to the local, it's sort of, you know, the main government-funded theatre. They have one in each city. And it was closed, and I just looked through the glass doors and I could see they have ensembles over there because it's repertoire. And I saw probably about 30 images of actors, you know, they present their cast right at the entrance. And they were all white. They were all white, and most of them had very German-sounding names as well. I don't even know if I've ever seen a Turkish person on a German stage, you know? No, I actually remember one play, but that was also about, it was a Turkish story also in it. So, but I think that Germany really, from my experience, was a good 10 to 15 years behind the UK in the awareness, you know, in the look, in the outward look as well. I think that Germany was a very self-contained industry. They just did what they did, you know, within their own borders. Yeah, but I'm glad to see that is changing now, and I'm making more of an effort to actually work over there as well. And I think, you know, I think that it's sort of, there's a snowballing effect. I think that the UK not being far, and they keep an eye obviously now on the English speaking industry as well, and Netflix, for instance, Netflix makes everything so much more international, right?
Yeah,
it's shaking up the entire market. And as much as you kind of look inwards in your country, you can't deny the fact that the world is becoming more globalized and more multicultural. And I think they realize that there's a lot, you know, they have some catching up to do. A lot of catching up to do. And, you know, and kind of, there are lots of discussions now there at, at theaters, you know, about equality, about visibility, and yeah, becoming aware of your own ideals and your own behavior. And so that's changing for the better, fortunately.
It's so interesting to hear how different things are within such a small distance, away, and to think, still in Europe, but it's very different. And, like you said, there's a big Turkish community there. So it's sad to see that they've constantly being cast in like minor roles or very stereotypical sort of roles. But it's good to hear that it's seeming to change, hopefully for the better.
I think so. I think there's a contagious effect of, countries can be role models for each other.
Yeah.
I think that one goes ahead and does something in a different way, and it feels like a more evolved state. And others go, well, okay, and learn from that. And it takes a long time, obviously. But yeah, that is encouraging. I hope that it will, spread all over Europe and into America, and that casting will be fairer in the future. More representative. I think that would be nice.
I was going to ask you, so you did your postgrad at Oxford School of Drama.
I did.
And I guess being there, did they ever teach anything about representation or diversity in media or anything like that?
Well, I think, interestingly, I think the school was in the public as a result of the Black Lives Matter movement, where I think it wasn't just the Oxford School of Drama, but there were a few other schools that was sort of questioned by ex-students and sort of came into the public and had to make statements about that.
Right.
And it was very weird. When I was there, I was surrounded by a lot of white middle class acting students, which was very odd for me because when I'd only been in the UK for a year when I started there. And I'm very grateful that they were open enough to take me on, because I think that wasn't a given either for drama schools, to trust foreign applicants to be able to speak the language well enough to be of benefit to the arts, Wow. And I'm glad that they accepted me. But yes, it was at that time, it was very white middle class. It was a very posh environment I was in. But what I only realized after graduation, way later, was that, I struggled a lot while I was there, because I consistently felt this lack of ability in terms of the English language. And I didn't know the country culturally as well as people that were brought up here. So I felt like I was trying to catch up throughout the entire year, really. I always felt there was a lack of something to me, and it was difficult, because you're working on Shakespeare, you're sort of writing your own poetry and all this nuance in the acting work, but you simply don't know that much about like the country you're in, right? And I think what I would have wanted from them would have been, I think what sort of the way it felt for me was that it was just ignored. Was maybe that sort of their approach of equal treatment was I wasn't treated any differently to all the other students.
Right.
But what that also means is that I was never actually pulled aside and complimented for the fact that, or, because I was having a hard time, and I think support would have been important.
Right.
To sort of keep an eye on me, see, like, just watch how I'm doing, and maybe go, look, you might feel like you're struggling, but you're doing something amazing here. Don't forget that you speak already 2 languages, and you're just like, you're learning, you're at the very beginning, and it's sort of tell me that it's special in a way, or make me feel good about the fact that, and not just leave me to my own merits and hope for the best. It wasn't celebrated enough. I also feel now that, imagine you have, and I had in my year Romanian actress, and then one more person who was brought up in Norway, and I thought, we never performed, never really. I think only once it happened because I asked for it. We never performed things in our own language. And isn't it a great opportunity for an acting teacher to bring out, like, there is a person that comes to you with different sounding languages, and you're spending, you're teaching phonetics and like, you're teaching them the nature of language and how to use language well, and where it comes from, and you have people there who speak those languages and could do things that everyone can listen to and maybe learn something from. At the very least, it's interesting, but it was never done. It's just this material that is there on offer, and you're not even thinking about using that, and it was never talked about with my year either. They were very nice. I mean, my year I felt very accepted and supported by them. I loved the people I trained with, but I feel like instead of not talking about it, it would have been more useful to say, okay, this is that, and look what they can do, and look what you can do, and, what can we make out of that? But I think that is also changing for the better. I think that drama schools are also learning. They're trying to kind of reach out to working class people from working class backgrounds and ethnic minority backgrounds as well, and include them more. And that's where it starts. If you have a more colorful, varied spectrum of human beings studying acting in your school, well, they will go into the industry, and
exactly,
that already means change. So they're at the heart of it, really. Very important who they choose.
Yeah, exactly. If you have a bunch of people that are going to be future actors and actresses, and they are surrounded by people from different countries and different cultures, they're automatically going to learn, and then they're going to go into that industry and become the writers that know exactly what this region is, what people from this region look like, and that will push for change. So I think, in some ways it seems as if that's one of the best starting points, is through education to get that across.
Absolutely. They are they have a very important role, actually, because they do partly shape the industry. I auditioned for a lot of drama schools before I came to the UK, and I think I did about 20 over there, and I had about 4 final rounds, which means you're in the last 30 of 1,000 applicants or so, which means you've got pretty far, but you need to get into the last 10 or 12. And that was very difficult for me. And later on, I mean, this all, to understand my own past, that took a while. And today I'm thinking, I used to think maybe I'm not good enough. Maybe I'm just not good enough to come up with a sort of explanation for why it wasn't working out for me. And today, all I can think is, from their perspective, you have this, because Turkish applicants at drama schools were incredibly rare.
Right, yeah, you can imagine.
Incredibly rare at the time when I was doing it. So you're this panel, and you get this young Turkish person with aspirations auditioning, and they do well enough to get actually amongst the last 30 out of 1,000. So now you need to decide, can they actually train here? At any one of those final rounds that I had, they didn't decide to have me, to train me. And I thought, do you know what? Even if I wasn't on par with some of the other actors that they picked, don't they have a responsibility towards, like, they have to think, okay, first of all, what is the background of this person? Are they as privileged? They grew up in a Turkish household. What does that mean for the way they interact in German? What was their access to theater growing up?
Mm-hmm.
And would it be a good choice for our country and our culture to actually encourage people from that background to also get into the arts?
Yeah.
And the answer is yes.
100%.
And they were blind to that. And that really upsets me a lot, that I think I would have deserved a chance purely for that fact. And I think it would have been good. I mean, what it really meant was that I left the country and I came here, and I'm now trying to be of artistic, sort of add something of artistic value to the UK, which is also lovely, but they lost me in that way.
Yeah.
And that must have happened to a lot of other, not just Turkish applicants, but of other backgrounds. And I hope that is changing now as well. But it took me a long, long time, and it was traumatizing for me, really, that time, because in your own mind you do think, like, what is the problem here? What is the problem? You don't know, and you're aware you're of a different background that isn't really present in the world of theater over there. Turkish people aren't part of the German theatrical industry, or weren't, at least at the time.
Yeah.
So you feel like you're an intruder, you know.
I'm sorry to hear that. You know, and it is horrible because you start doubting yourself at points as well. I can imagine. You know, you think, you know, you were even saying like you thought you weren't good enough, but that's not necessarily the case. And I feel like one of the biggest issues, in my opinion, like as someone that watches a lot of movies and TV shows, I feel like one of the biggest issues is when there's not enough Mena representation. It stops a lot of people that are passionate about getting into that industry from wanting to go in the first place because they have no one to look up to from the same background as them. And they go, well, if like there's so many talented people around the world, but if I'm not seeing it on my screen, it obviously means there's not enough opportunities. I can't do it, you know. And then you yourself start doubting.
Yeah.
And it goes back to what you were saying, how, you know, if they were to cast you or anyone else from a similar background to you, it would actually open up a door for other people from the same background as you to want to audition, want to make it into this industry.
No,
so
exactly.
It's really a shame.
And at the end of the day, it would be of benefit to their arts sector and to their society, you know, to have now this you know, these people of that particular background that have been a part of your country for, at that time, I was auditioning in 2012, so it would have been 50 years into. I was a third generation immigrant, so it was my grandfather who went there, but it was mostly in the late 60s. For 50 years, you have these people living with you. And, you know, if you're looking for a healthy society, wouldn't it be a good idea to, after 50 years of them being there, actually include them in this, you know,
100%.
Make them part of it. Try your best. And even if there's a lack of ability, apparently, that could be the case, well, then work on it. Try to get them to where the others are, right?
Yeah.
Make it work. Like, have faith. But yeah.
And if it goes back to the fact that they're not good enough, which I don't really think is the case, but if that's what they're saying, then they should be providing the facilities and, you know, providing the opportunities for people from that background to train, to get better.
Precisely.
You know, it's not really an excuse. I think there's always a way around it. It's about providing the opportunities for these people.
Yeah. And I was, you know, I was very lucky because when I, you know, this is sort of side topic, but German high schools are divided in 3 levels, and only one of them leads to access to university. And at the time when I went to the highest tier school because my marks were good enough, but only 1% of all Turkish children and teenagers actually had access to that school. And the others had to, you know, they received a lower level of education. They graduated earlier and were encouraged to put into apprenticeships and you know, other kind of jobs. And it's out of the question why they ended up in those schools. It certainly wasn't a lack of intelligence. You know. It brings us back to education. Full circle.
100%. And it's the same everywhere. I think in the UK it's the same as well. Obviously the richer you are, and also being from a white background definitely makes you a little bit more privileged in where you end up. And it's back to what you were saying, even being at Oxford, you said you were predominantly around white middle class.
I was. Well, yeah, because I think a lot of them would have gone to private schools. And I am hyper aware of this coming from Germany because in terms of education, money doesn't really matter over there. You know, I mean, money does always matter because obviously you can give certain things, you know, to your child, whether it's a private teacher or whatever, but you don't actually pay to go to school. So all schools are government funded, and so is uni. You don't need to pay. You don't pay to go to uni either. Right. And so coming here to see that gap, that vast gap in class. I wasn't even aware of class as much as I, you know, in Germany as I'm here. Here it's so evident. And then you, interestingly, because class has been a part of this country for such a long time, you also get people who are really unaware or dormant to it. It's just normality. Right? But it's really, really obvious to me being able to compare. Yeah, and you're right.
Yeah, I mean that's really, it's crazy to think about, because you're right here. There's a really big issue when it comes to class.
Really, yeah.
And it's actually, I saw something on Twitter, was it, a few weeks ago, and it was talking about British actors, and it was comparing American actors and British actors, and what percentage of like well-known American actors went to private school versus state school, and then they compared it to British actors that are really well known, and what percentage of them went to private school and then normal like state school. And the comparison was crazy, because so many really well-known actors from the UK, so many of them went to private schools. And it just really shows a lot, and it's just such a shame. It really is.
Yeah, it's a real problem. It's the inequality of education.
Yeah,
the fact that you receive such a the quality of education increasing so, but it's not only that, and then it's reputation, obviously. I mean, you pay for one thing, you receive a great education and many opportunities, but it's also that reputation, the diploma that you get, it makes a huge difference. The name of Eton, the name of Oxford, the name of Cambridge, this is something that I feel the UK has a sense of pride for.
100%.
Like, I think that there's a sense of actually wanting to protect that, let alone erase it.
Right.
It's actually going in the other direction. Whereas in Germany, you can't really come out of a uni and people will go, "Oh, you're sorted because you come from that uni." That is not the case. Like, it doesn't work like that. There's no sense of elitism in that respect.
I think that issue is with all subjects. In the UK, like even when I was applying to uni, it was always like, make sure you go to a Russell Group uni. Make sure you go to, like, if you apply to this job against someone from Oxford, Cambridge, and you go to this uni, you're not going to stand out.
Yeah,
it's kind of embedded into our brains in school. Like, you need to go to a good university with a name, a good reputation, in order to stand out. And like you said, it's not going away. If anything, it is getting worse.
That's that there are lots of people who wouldn't want to lose that status as well. I think that kind of benefit from it and would like to keep it that way.
As a closing question, so what do you think can be done in the future to ensure better representation in the media and in this industry?
I think that we have a responsibility as individuals, because we shape ourselves, and by shaping ourselves, we shape the people around us. And I think that the problem is that sometimes if I as an individual have a lack of knowledge, I might end up in a position one day where that lack of knowledge hurts another person. And I think that we need to keep educating, keep communicating, keep listening more than speaking, listening to the right people, learning what we don't know yet, so that when it comes to it, we can conduct ourselves in a way that does not hurt the freedom or sense of self-worth of others. And so I think, really weirdly, I mean, I think it starts, and that I say to myself as well, I feel pressure to educate myself, on the experience of racism, or what it's like to be ethnic minority. I've only realized a lot of these things very recently, to be honest. And I feel that I should do more. And I think we all have to do more. The beginning of it will be, it will come from the public, from the actual people, and hopefully industry will react to that. I think that's all I can say. But really, it goes back to the point that I said before. I think what I would really like to see is just a really, really open mind when it comes to casting. Open when it can be, because this is the problem, right? You can't generalize. You can't. There's no one approach that works in all situations. So I think what we need to understand is the dilemmas and the complexity of the casting process. We have to understand and try our best to be open-minded when the project allows it, and to be respectful and respectful of somebody's background and faithful to whatever the history of that part is when that needs to be the case, and keep learning. And that's it. I think that's what I would want to see. Yeah.
Thank you so much. Thank you. I think
Thank
you
you.
put it really greatly. I really, really enjoyed the discussion.
I've lost track of time.
Yeah. So thank you so much for being here.
Thank you.
I hope you enjoyed it as well.
I did.
Thank you. I will put all of your social media platforms in the description box for everybody
Please do.
else.
Great.
Yes. And yeah, hopefully we will speak very soon.
Yeah. Look forward to it.
Thank you very much.
Take care.
Bye. Bye.
Bye bye.